hovering apparition. I live in Oklahoma. One day, my friend sent me a snap asking if I wanted to go fishing with him later that day. I had nothing else to do, and I love to fish, so I accepted his offer. After a couple of hours, I got my tackle box and fishing pole and began making my way to his house. Once I arrived, he was already outside gassing up the four-wheelers. After he finished, we hopped on them and began making our way to his pond. The pond is about 5 acres away from his house, and we weren't trying to walk all that distance. We pull up to the pond and begin unloading our things and pick up the small rowboat he keeps by the pond and put it in the water. We had been out for about 4 hours, but we had a great day and caught a lot of fish. We had decided to stay for a bit longer to try and catch some more. Luckily, our lazy asses had brought the four-wheelers because the sun had already pretty much set, so we turned on the spotlights on the four-wheelers to see better. To pass some time, we played some poker until we got a bite. About 15 minutes into our match, the water began to splash and the line on my friend's pole was being pulled. We both excitedly looked over just to be horrified by the sight of an Indian man standing above the water. It was so unexpected that it scared the shit out of us, causing us to tip the boat over. We disregarded the boat and swam back to the four-wheelers and left as fast as possible. When we got back to his house, we told his parents what we had seen. His mom just shook her head and his dad just laughed. We more or less took that as a sign to f*** off and to not fish there again. Hat Man. I had never heard of Hat Man until I was describing to my oldest son this weird feeling I had of being watched. My home was built in 1984. I do know the previous owner's first husband died. Not sure if it was in the house. We are on 5 acres of woods. The house sits in the center of the property, and there is a 100-year-old cemetery that butts up to our backyard with 6 graves. We bought the place in 2017. I've always been sensitive, and I hear, smell, and sometimes see things, and many times how I pick up on spirits is feeling them there and seeing them in my mind's eye. A while back, I kept feeling I was being watched, and what I saw in my mind was a tall man wearing an old-fashioned hat. Think a hat worn by plague doctors. I mentioned to my son, and he got very concerned about Hat Man. He advised me to not dwell on it, I don't know why, and he couldn't articulate a reason, just a feeling. Within 6 months, our 9-year-old Rottweiler developed osteosarcoma. It was a very fast-growing cancer, and we had to have him put down. Rotties are very engaging with their people, and it broke our hearts. Since we have so much property, we found a pretty place and buried him there. I haven't felt Hat Man since. I spun around. They were gone. When I was a kid, we used to visit family in another part of town. I knew all the kids around, so would often go on my own for the afternoon. On my way back from visiting a friend, I took a shortcut. It led through a wooded area where there was an old cemetery. I looked at the old stones, most of them unreadable, as I walked past. I continued on the path and came to the stream with a wide bridge. My sneakers made a stomping sound on the old boards. As I was about halfway, I saw a funeral party approaching. The sun was close to setting and was in my eyes, but the group were all dressed in black and several men at the front were carrying a small coffin. I turned around and clomped back to the other side. I took off my cap and turned down my eyes in respect, but all the while a small part of my mind was trying to get my attention. They walked past without a word. When they were past, I clomped up the bridge again, and that's when I started thinking clearly. I had just walked past the cemetery. There was no one there and no grave prepared. The cemetery wasn't used in a long time. And then I realized something else. They hadn't made a sound as they crossed the bridge. I spun around, and they were gone. Aunt Linda's house. Well, knowing that my family has had a rocky past with ghosts in different places they've lived, it's no wonder my family has a multitude of stories. I found one that really intrigued me. It was my favorite place to stay during the summer, my Aunt Linda's house. Her house was at one time a two-family house, but when she bought the place, they opened the house up. There was a hallway connecting the two halves of the house and a small room at the center. This room for a long time was my uncle's bedroom, her younger brother. While cleaning up the house, they had found an old rocking chair in the attic. He had taken it and put it in a corner of his room, using it as a reading chair during the night. One night after basketball practice, he lay down on his bed across the room from the rocking chair and fell asleep. Very early one morning, he recalls waking to the sound of squeaking. Turning his head ever so slightly, so as not to frighten his sister, as he was sure it was her coming to check on him one last time before she went to work, he caught the rocking chair in mid-rock. Shaking his head and trying to clear the sleep from it, he slowly sat up and watched as a smoky figure of a woman crossed from one doorway and sat down in the chair, a foggy bundle in her arms. As she sat and rocked, he began to hear the faint sounds of humming, singing. He leaned forward, straining to hear what she was saying. He smiled as he heard her say, "It's okay, Johnny. Mama's got you now. Sleep, my little love." And he fell back to sleep. He later told his sister about it, and she nodded, saying, "Yeah, I guess some lady's baby's son died of scarlet fever here a ways back. It must be her rocking chair. We can get rid of it if you want." He only shook his head no and said, "Nah, I thought it was sweet." I would like to thank all of our Premiere Thursday, formerly Lairables, participants and viewers for a great season. We are taking a well-deserved hiatus and will return in October. Until then, the Premiere Thursday channel will be up with all the playlists that have been created since its inception for your viewing pleasure. Our participants will still be putting out new content on their channels, so make sure you visit them. Thank you for watching.